When security tried to throw a man off the field with high commitment during a football game, they didn't think he had a team. What happened next shocked the entire stadium, causing movements that changed everything. The energy in the stadium was electrical. Fans from Arlington, Texas stood up and roared as the team got busy in the playoffs. The smell of popcorn and hot dogs filled the air, and the fields glowed under floodlights. Everything seemed to run like clockwork. Shortly before halftime, a man appeared in a slim charcoal suit at the edge of the field. He was big, and his gait was steadily commanding his attitude, but he seemed very wrong. Sideline pass, team equipment, clamp boards are just confidence and suits. At first, the crowd paid less attention. However, the game shifted when the two guards marched towards him. It was subtle at first, some appearance, and it tweets. On Jumbo's screen, the camera looked at the man and saw his quiet face as opposed to the guard. "Hey, you can't come here," one of the guards cried, and his voice passed through the noise. The man stopped, and his hand slid freely into his pocket. "I'm here for business," he replied. His tone is cool but not confrontational. "Work?" It wasn't that there were no passes, but I was planning to grab the second guard. Return to the back of the barricade. Now. The man was not convulsing. Instead, he pointed to the bench. His expression was unreadable. "This is my business." The security guards didn't do. I grabbed his radio and requested a backup. The fans in the front row leaned forward, and they felt something was unfolding. The bench players have swapped their appearances. The man changed his weight slightly, but kept the floor. "I don't need a passport," he said. "You make a mistake." As more security guards approached, the crowd became restless. The tweets were whispered and speculated through the running fire-like stands. What happens next will silence the entire stadium. The guard was now caught between the man and her voice, became louder when he pointed out that he was going. The scene developed with a complete vision of thousands of people was impossible to ignore. The whistles and cheers from the game faded as people turned their attention to the excitement of the bystanders. "Sir, this is her last warning," the guard in his hand said. The man remained calm, and his voice squealed softly, but he made up his mind. "Oh, would you escort me? Do you know who I am?" This question seemed to confuse the question. "We don't care who they are," the other guards grabbed the rules. Players and employees noticed the patient's situation from the bystanders. Some co-trainers replaced the confused look. One of the wide range of recipients, frozen and blinking at the man, along with his teammate in the middle. He muttered and put off it. The man didn't speak up and lost his composure. Instead, he pulled his phone out of his pocket and began scrolling. "I'd like to rethink that again," he said. But before he could show them, one of the guards grabbed his arm. The gesture caused collective shortness of breath from the crowd. A wave of discomfort spread as the fans appeared in their seats. The phone was opened and recorded a drama that unfolded. "Let me go," the man said. His voice had a warning. The guard tightened his grip and pulled the man back. The man planted his legs and refused to stir them. In the meantime, the stadium camera turned the lens into a scene and sent it over the giant Jambotron. "What is there?" The head coach approached the bystander and frowned as he picked up the scene. And then there was recognition. His face was locked in. "Stop!" The trainer barked and shook his arm to the guard. "Let him go." The guards are confused. The trainer moved quickly, wrapping up the number of players and employees until he faced the man. "Mr. Caldwell, sorry," he cried. His voice was low but urgent. The guards replaced the confused look. "Mr. Caldwell?" One of them repeated, and their name is audible about the growth of crowd chatter. "Yes," the trainer said, and turned to the security guard. "This is the new majority owner of our team." Words hit like flash. The crowds, guards, and players were all frozen. The guard slowly returned, turning pale when the steering wheel loosened. "Owner?" one of them whispered, cracking his voice. The man set his jacket and stroked his sleeves as if nothing had happened. He said that was correct and looked directly at the security guard. "I own this team." A wave of shock has overcome the amount. The beans, whispers, and marbled fill the stadium. In the jamboon, the man's face filled the screen. His gentle expression is a strong contrast to the chaos that erupted around him. But that moment wasn't over. He was about to make a sharper turn. The tension in the stadium was noticeable. Thousands of eyes were targeted at men who had just been identified as owners of the new majority of the team. Energy shifted from confusion to shock and somewhat serious discomfort. A story of bubbles on the stand. Wait, is he the owner? Why didn't you recognize him? Did you think he wasn't a member? The guard freezes, with big eyes and difficult to handle. One of them risked their life. "We didn't know, Sensei. We did our job." The man now known as Mr. Caldwell tilted his head slightly and steadily declared his gaze, but he was stubborn. "Do you have any work?" he said. His tone is sharp. "Something that has been measured or not yet accepted?" The guard replied with his mouth open, but there were no words. The camera zoomed into Caldwell's face. His picture filled the Jumbotron. The crowd watched in enthusiastic silence as they turned their attention to the bench player who was currently standing. Caldwell's expression was softer than he spoke in front of the trainer. "Thank you for coming in," he said. "But I'm not the only one at this moment. It's about what happened and why it happened." The trainer nodded quietly, then went aside and gave Caldwell the floor. Slowly, Caldwell returned to his guard. "I'm not mad," he said. His voice calms down and pierces. "But I am disappointed. How often does it happen to someone who looks like me, not just you?" The explanation landed strongly, pulling a mixture of shortness of breath and tweets from the audience. Some fans nodded in agreement, others became uncomfortable in their seats and leaned back. One of the guards tried to apologize again, but Caldwell raised his hand. "There are no excuses. I like to talk about lessons here," he said, and it led him towards the middle of the field. There, all his eyes were already glued to him. Mr. Caldwell stepped into the middle of the field, with the lighting at the top throwing a command-shaped glow around it. The roaring of the stadium settled into a muffled sum of voices. Even players who were busy on the sidelines attracted their full attention. He had no microphone, but his presence was so magnetic that his voice ran the air comfortably. "I didn't come here to make the scene," he started. His voice is stable and calm, but I didn't expect to handle it either. The silence at the stadium was deepened. The phones increased on the stand and recorded all the words. The view of Caldwell was swept across the ocean. What happened was not just mine, but continued to point to the frozen guards near the bystanders. Making habits, making assumptions about who belongs and who does not belong is about something bigger. A wave of agreement passed through a portion of the crowd. Others moved uncomfortably into their seats. "You didn't recognize me," Caldwell said, speaking directly to the guard. "What would you tell your fans?" The crowd listened carefully. Caldwell's words meant, but his delivery was smooth, as if he was talking to everyone in the stadium. "As you can see, assumptions are dangerous," he continued. "They don't just cause moments of embarrassment. They immortalize the barriers. They send messages that obstacles that don't actually belong to do not belong to." Caldwell took a break and settled the weight of his words over the crowd. A few fans began to applaud, and the sound hesitated, but it grew. "This team, this game, this stadium, they represent something bigger than football," he said. His voice is getting stronger. "They unite where skills, commitment, and passion connect people together. And I'm proud to own this team. Not because it contributes to my portfolio, but because it means reducing these barriers." Applause spread across the stadium, and although I was hesitant at first, I quickly made it. Caldwell raised his hands again to calm the noise. "I didn't come here to play the victim," he said. "I came here and gave lessons that we all had to listen to. You never make someone decide what looks like when you deal with it. It's not this field, not this world." The crowd broke out, and the squeals of support echoing throughout the stadium. Caldwell nodded once and looked at the guards. "And I hope you will wear this lesson with you tonight." The visibly shaking guards nodded, their faces being a mixture of embarrassment and relief. Caldwell reached out to each of them and offered a solid handshake. The gesture was a public act of reconciliation, but the story wasn't over yet. This was a spark lit up by a much larger conversation. Applause remained on the field for a long time after leaving Mr. Caldwell and returned to his seat in the owner's box. The camera chased him with a jerk-bootron, and the crowd couldn't distract him. The incident shifted energy throughout the stadium. What began as a tense misunderstanding became a moment of billing and inspiration. When the game ended, social media was already on fire. Clips of conflict and Caldwell's speech flooded all the platforms and collected millions of views. Within hours, hashtags like WoBelongShare and Caldwell Lesson began to debate well beyond the world of trends, debate, and sports. The next morning, the press was always dissected. Some praised his grace and tranquility, calling it a masterclass for leads. Others criticized the security guards, and many demanded that many consider them to be racial profile acts. However, Caldwell was not interested in re-editing the department. Instead, he published an explanation that went viral due to his simplicity and power. Last night, it wasn't about shaping someone. It was about learning and education. We all remember that what we accept about others is saying more about us than about them. We make it better. The statement is a chord. Within a few days, he began his speeches as a teacher in sports organizations, businesses, and even schools. The workshop was created with unconscious bias, and Caldwell's story was at the heart of the story. Even the security guards involved in the incident reported and apologized publicly. Caldwell met with them personally and confirmed that their growth was part of the story. "We're all learning," he said in a TV interview. "Most importantly, you're ready." In the meantime, Caldwell's story had an impact on deeper conversations in the league itself. However, the deepest effect was seen by fans, letters from all over the country. Some people talked about their own mistakes. Others thanked Caldwell for the conversation. The letter stood out. It came from a boy from Arkansas. "I love soccer, but sometimes I don't feel like it's a good fit because it looks different to my teammates. After seeing what you did, I am proud to be me. Thank you for showing us that we all belong." Caldwell shared the letter at a press conference. His voice made his emotions thicker. "So I did that," he said, "because it should feel like no one belongs to them." At that moment, it was grown beyond the stadium and beyond soccer. "That's what I'm moving now, and it wasn't slow." A few months after the incident, the impact of Mr. Caldwell's actions still reflected. Inspired by owner leadership, the team launched an initiative called Attribute, a campaign that deals with trends into the field of sports and community. The workshops were held in schools, youth leagues, and even corporate offices. Caldwell himself became a speaker not only in the world of sports, but also in the room where he needed his message the most. He never leaned against rage or res. Instead, he used his story to build a bridge. "Assumptions are a wall," he said frequently. However, consciousness is a shelter that breaks down. The security guards from that night became an unexpected part of the movement. Both attended several workshops and spoke openly about their experiences and lessons they learned. One of them said in a TV interview, "But Mr. Caldwell taught me something that night. Now I'm teaching others what I've learned. The stadium where everything happened has also become a symbol of change. The badge was placed directly in front of the main entrance with Caldwell's words engraved on it. Fans often stopped to take photos. Many of them shared their own considerations about how the story touched. The most important moment came during the team's playoff period in the same season. Before the opening game, Mr. Caldwell was invited into the middle of the field and once again spoke to the crowd. There was no misunderstanding or hesitation this time. The cheering seemed deafening as he stepped into the microphone. The stadium now united the sea of fans under the message. "Tonight isn't football," Caldwell began. His voice was effortlessly about the full arena. "It's about this sport and what you can do when you stop looking at differences as barriers and seeing them as strengths. Remember, they belong. We all do that." A sum was generated when applause and players acquired the field with a new sense of purpose. It was no longer just a game, it was a statement. As the team fought for the night's victory, lessons Caldwell shared far more than they had at the stadium. His message wasn't just about belonging to the field, it was about belonging everywhere. And the story leaves a challenge. What assumptions do we lift? Remember, changes start with us. I'll move this lesson forward. If this story is working with you, don't let it stop here. Share it with those who have to listen to it. We take on meeting people because they are not what we really expect from them. And if you believe that you can create the world that everyone belongs, subscribe to our channel for other stories that inspire, challenge, and combine us all.